Gavin Newsom begging the bureaucracy that he previously instructed to shut down the industry to somehow throw him a lifeline in the face of these rising gas prices.
Steve Hilton, a government policy advisor and a former Fox News contributor, officially launched his bid.
He recently authored a book called Califailure, Director of Strategy for British Prime Minister David Cameron back in the day.
What's your critique of the Republican Party, what it's done wrong, and what needs to shift to not only win the governorship, but actually run the table on winning statewide offices and actually change the state? In your view, what else needs to be done to really get the ball rolling on building housing in California?
First of all, we should know it's the foundational problem. People are leaving California, just can't afford to live here. The idea of buying a home for most people now is just impossible.
It's good to see you in person, be mano a mano.
Yeah.
Looking forward to chatting. I want to start with, you're out on the trail.
Yes.
It's been almost 3 months.
Has it? Wow.
Since you announced, yeah.
Okay.
Almost 3 months in the time warp. What's the biggest surprise?
It's such an interesting question because on one level, nothing. In the sense that I've been working on the ideas that are the kind of foundation of my campaign, on the policy issues and the problems facing California that I chronicled in my book Califailure, and the things that I've been working on my policy organization Golden Together for years now. So the facts, the issues, the problems, all of that is very familiar territory for me. I've been working on that for years. I suppose the thing that, and I've been traveling the state for years, so I feel I know California really well. Obviously getting to know it better and meeting more and more people, and that's fantastic. I think the thing that is different now that I'm seeing, thousands of people coming to events, not just Republicans, obviously many of the events are Republican, but you have independent voters and people aren't that interested in politics, Democrats coming along. I think the single thing is the intensity, the real kind of human suffering, I want to say, the intensity of the pain. And the word that for me captures what I'm sort of feeling from the stories that people are telling and the way that they're reacting to what I'm saying is struggle. Just the struggle of existing in California today. If you're a family trying to keep it together, to make ends meet, to kind of literally put food on the table and pay for stuff. If you're a business, particularly a small business, trying to operate with a kind of endless deluge of regulations and nonsense and taxes and lawsuits and just, oh my God, this sense of struggle is so real. And I guess the intensity of that, the level of that, yes, that did take me by surprise.
It's surprising.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
surprising. It's interesting that it feels like it's surprising and not surprising.
Yes,
all the same, given where we are.
I think
you're
that's
seeing
right.
it in reality.
Exactly, the
ground.
human manifestation of something that I'd been aware of from a policy point of view for many years. Yeah.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Let's talk about uni-party rule, which
Yes.
has run the state into the ground. The Democrats have been wasting our money for years. We put an episode out today with Steve Wesley, the former state controller, who's a good guy and he's a centrist. And if you look at the opening, he talks about how Democrats, are really responsible for budget malfeasance. So I think we're probably in violent agreement on that. I had Dan Schnur on a week ago, and Dan talks about how the Republican Party has essentially forfeited its competitiveness the last half generation or generation. What's your critique of the Republican Party, what it's done wrong, and what needs to shift to not only win the governorship, but actually run the table on winning statewide offices and actually change the state?
So I don't speak for the party, and I've always been an independent minded person, even when I was working for the Conservative Prime Minister in the UK. And remember, that was a coalition government between the Conservative Party and the Liberal Democrats back in the day. So I don't consider myself a kind of party person in that sense. And also, I haven't been here for all those years that Dan is referring to there. We moved here, my wife and my sons, in 2012. And actually, for the first few years of that, I wasn't particularly involved in politics here. I was teaching at Stanford, starting a tech company, not necessarily focused on politics in California. I guess the way I put it is that I'll try and put it positively, which is that what I'm trying to do is to put in front of the electorate here a really positive, inspiring alternative to the years of one party rule. Something that is really credible and believable, but also represents the kind of change they want to see in an exciting way that's not just the same old political talking points delivered in the same kind of way. And so that freshness and energy, I think, is certainly what I'm trying to convey in the campaign, and that's what I think will be successful. So I guess you could take it from that, that perhaps my view is that that wasn't always apparent in the campaigns of the past. But I think on the issues, there's no question that the the basic Republican argument has been right all along. You're seeing it right now, for example, in the way that Democrats are embracing the Republican argument. I mean, one of the most amazing things, maybe this should be the biggest surprise. I'm just realizing it was one event in Sacramento a few weeks ago. The Chamber of Commerce, the California Chamber of Commerce, did it wasn't really a debate, they called it a forum with myself, Chad Bianco, one of the other Republicans, and four of the Democrats running for governor. And we were sitting there on on the stage. And it was amazing to me that one by one, the Democrats stood up and made the arguments that I've been making for years. So I couldn't believe the very first candidate up on stage, Antonio Villaraigosa, former mayor of LA, Democrat, stood up and said, "It's terrible. California is the worst. We have the worst business climate in the country. We can't go on like this. It's terrible." And Katie Porter stands up and said, "It's really impossible to raise a family. Everything is so expensive. You try raising kids now, groceries, rent, everything is too expensive." Laini Kounalakis, the lieutenant governor next to me, stood up and said, "This housing crisis is just terrible. We've had too much regulation and too much red tape, and it's holding up housing construction." And Tony Atkins, who was the leader of the Democrats in the state Senate, presiding over all this. "Oh, it's everything's too regulated and it's impossible to do anything in California." You think, yes, that's right.
What they
That's
said.
what exactly what they said.
Oh.
And they've been presiding over us, but now they're acknowledging the truth of what Republicans have been saying for years. And I mean, another a more narrow example, a very big issue, is if you look at the issue of climate policy and fossil fuels. I mean, just look what's happened in the last couple of months after years of the war on fossil fuels and shutting down California oil and gas production and driving it out. It was all going to be solar and wind and all this stuff. And now it's Gavin Newsom begging the bureaucracy that he previously instructed to shut down the industry to somehow throw him a lifeline in the face of these rising gas prices by keeping the industry going, rolling back climate regulations. I think on the issues, there's been, I think there's been very ample evidence that the basic Republican argument has been correct. But I guess it's not enough just to make the argument against. You've got to make the argument for. You've got to have a really dynamic, attractive, inspiring, positive alternative that people want to vote for. And that's what I see as the central point of my campaign.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And back to some policy, because you mentioned the word immigration.
Yeah.
We've got ICE and the feds operating in California. They're doing their jobs. They're trying to execute the law. And we've got a huge Latino population, 40% of the state, amazingly, 15 million out of 39 million residents who surged for Trump in 2024, right, in the state. But as I travel the state and talk privately with prominent Republican Latinos and Latinas, they're getting wary.
Yes.
They're getting wary because the abuelita next door and, the people who worked on their factory site are being impacted by ICE enforcement. What would your policy be in California as governor around immigration?
Yeah.
What is your message to the Latino community?
Well, let's take them in turn. I think that the point about immigration is, first of all, it's federal policy. I'm a real strong advocate for decentralizing power. And I think everything's way too centralized in America. The idea that the federal government should be involved in, let alone running policy for California, the fourth biggest economy in the world, on healthcare and welfare and even anything to do with education or housing, urban development, huge parts of the federal government's operations in California, I think just make no sense at all. And I would fight strongly to reduce that kind of federal, over centralization. But there's one area which is clearly in the realm of federal operations, and that is immigration. It's one country, and we have one immigration system, one nationality system, and so on. And so that's the first point, that this is federal law enforcement, and it's a policy that people voted for pretty clearly. President Trump won the popular vote and won all the swing states, and there's not really any argument about the legitimacy or the clarity with which he made this case right through the election campaign, and people voted for it, including the people you described who voted for him. Secondly, in terms of the actual enforcement operations, what you're seeing on the ground, those are entirely caused by Democrat resistance to this, because the reason that you have some of these high-profile enforcement operations from ICE is precisely because you're not getting cooperation from state and local law enforcement. Tom Homan makes this argument all the time, that if we had cooperation, we could just deal with this at the court, at the prison, at the jail. We wouldn't need to go into communities. We don't need to do that. The only reason we need to do that is where we don't get cooperation. So you look at states like Florida, you're not seeing this kind of operation because there you've got a close working relationship, a proactive relationship between Governor DeSantis and ICE. And they've made a virtue of that. And it's going much more smoothly without this kind of upheaval in communities. So this is caused by the sanctuary policy. And then the further point of detail on that is that the Democrats may say, well, it's the law. We have a sanctuary state law passed in 2017, SB 54. It's true that that's the law, but it's also true that within the law, and I've read it, it's very clear that it actually requires discretion for local and state law enforcement to cooperate with ICE on federal immigration enforcement where there is a record of a criminal offense within the last 15 years for the illegal immigrant. And there's a specified list of crimes, and it's very long. It's over 200. And it's everything you'd expect in terms of violent crimes, assault, burglary, rape, murder, all those things. Also, illegal possession of a firearm, drug offensive, anything in that realm. There is discretion within the sanctuary state law for cooperation. So the first thing I would do is to cooperate. Now you wouldn't have this kind of enforcement operation that we're seeing. But more specifically on Latinos, you mentioned prominent Latinos, and I think that's an interesting word because most of my time, I guess, has been spent not so much, you could say, with prominent Latinos in that sense, but actual working class Latinos in their communities. And you can see the videos that we've made. I film a lot of the conversations that I have. And there you find people who are legal immigrants, either became citizens themselves or their families, been here many years, proud to be Americans, incredibly resentful at the illegal immigration situation. I mean, just in East LA, early in the campaign, I'm sitting there, Mexican coffee shop in East LA, and we're talking about this. I raised this exact issue: deportations, mass deportations. What do you think? What about the grandmother? I mean, almost the same language that you just used. The language coming back was almost as harsh as you'd hear from Stephen Miller in terms of, no, this is not okay. Why should we pay for, I'm just telling you exactly what they say. You go into the grocery store, you see these people with their EBT cards and their free cell phones, and they get the free housing vouchers, and there's 20 of them living in an apartment that's for 4 people, and you have all the cars in the street, and we can't park, and all the chaos. No, they should all go back. That's what I'm hearing from working class Latinos in California.
Appreciate that. Let's talk about one other topic area in policy, housing. Newsom, after you could argue years and years and years late, finally signed CEQA reform, the California Environmental Quality Act. Signing laws in California does not necessarily equal change, as we know, right? In fact, it often just sort of adds to the layers of silt of bureaucracy. But this is a significant shift. It does stomp down some of the barriers to building housing. But in your view, what else needs to be done from an executive order or policy perspective to really get the ball rolling on building housing in California?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we should know it's the foundational problem. It's the number one reason people are leaving California, just can't afford to live here. And that very simple idea of the California dream, I think, is really rooted in home ownership and having a place of your own in this beautiful state. That's just been snatched away by years and years of these policies that have given us the highest housing costs in the country, the lowest home ownership, it's impossible to, I mean, the idea of buying a home for most people now is just impossible. I remember how I felt when I bought my own place. I started a business in England, and, my family didn't have money. I had to make all the money, and I started a company, made a bit of money, bought an apartment in London. I'll never forget that feeling of just, I remember it's so, literally, I can just picture it. Just walking across the threshold, I bought this place. It's mine. I did, it's an amazing feeling. And it just breaks my heart that that's being taken, has been taken away and continues to be taken away by these policies where the idea of home ownership is just, people laugh at the idea of it in California. And it's not just the individuals who are hurt by that. Parents are hurt because their kids have to move out of state. I hear that all the time. Grandparents, I'm not going to see my grandkids because they have to move to Nashville or Texas or Florida, wherever it is, to get that thing that we
Those
used
three
to have
places,
here.
basically.
Exactly. That used to be here. It used to be us that offered that opportunity, and now it's other states. So it's really foundational. It's like, if they, it's the first issue I worked on when I was getting back into the whole world of policy and politics and focusing on California. The housing crisis was the first thing I worked on. And so I know the issue very well. And it's true that some progress has been made, including recently. But you've got to put it in the context of over 100 pieces of housing legislation in the last few years. They're constantly putting in new bills in the legislature, and it's barely moved the needle. And I fear that the same is going to be true of these bills. Because if you look at these bills that Gavin Newsom touted as the arrival of the abundance agenda, and I, by the way, agree with him, and I've talked to Ezra Klein about the abundance agenda. You look at the policy papers that we produced at Golden together, for the years now, the word abundance is all the way through. Our energy paper is energy abundance, water abundance, abundant housing. So completely agree with that goal. But these bills are not going to deliver that because yet again, they've fallen victim to the structural reasons why I believe Democrats can never deliver the change that California needs and can never deliver specifically the abundance agenda because of the structural forces constraining the party, specifically the climate activism, the far left climate activism, and the unions. And actually, you could
Don't
put in there,
forget the trial lawyers.
I was going to say the third is the trial. I mean, this is what I say the whole time. The three forces that really control the Democratic Party: the unions, the lawyers, the climate activists. And you can trace so many of the problems back to that. And that's exactly right in relation to housing, because you've got these bills are not opening up construction around the state. It's yet again limited to what they call infill development. So it only applies to the existing development footprint, which is fine because some people do want to live in apartments in cities, particularly before they've had a family, and that's great. But we've got a lot of apartments in cities, and many of them are unoccupied. I was just in downtown LA, huge amounts of empty apartment buildings.
It's true.
And either because they're too expensive for the kind of regular working class people who actually need the homes, or the surrounding areas is so unattractive to live in. It doesn't make sense. But that's what you're going to get more of with these bills. It's only infill because of the density argument, which is that we can't have development outside of the development footprint because they call that sprawl. And that means you're going to have more driving, and that they have this thing called VMT, vehicle miles traveled. We have to have a limit on that, and so on, and so on, and so on. All driven by the climate agenda. But actually, I mean, I'll get to what I'll do. I'll do the critique, and then I'll get to what I would do. So that's the first thing: is infill only because it's got this ideology of density, which is really driven by climate. Secondly, it only applies to union construction. Even to get this through, yet again, they had to make a deal with the unions. Every single thing they've ever done on housing has been bedeviled by the fact that they can't make anything happen in Sacramento without the consent of the unions. And the unions insisted that to agree to this, they would have a requirement that all of these CEQA exemptions only apply if it's union construction, union labor. What does that do? It massively increases the cost. And that's what's been going on for years. That's why it costs 4 or 5. That's not the only reason. One of the main reasons why it costs 4 or 5 times as much to build the exact same floor plan in California as it does in a neighboring state. This is what's been going on for years, and they've been using the lawyers, right, filing these lawsuits under CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, using the private right of action to block development as leverage to negotiate project labor agreements, as they're called, with the developers. And the two components of those agreements are either what they call skilled and trained labor, which means union only, or a prevailing wage. Both of those things are conditions in this new legislation. So nothing's really changed. Now, I'm happy that we've made some progress. All progress is good, but I just don't think it's going to move the needle. So what I do, I would actually open up construction beyond. I would take head on this density argument. It's not the only way people want to live. People, it's California. This is not New York. It's not, they talk often about Europe and I know Europe. I lived in London for many years. California is different. It developed differently. People, they call it sprawl. I call it the California dream. That's what people want, especially when they have families. And you've got plenty of parts of California that want to build out, but that's being stopped by these regulations enforced either through CARB or the regional air quality groups and so on, all with this ideology of infill only density and so on, near transit. By the way, the people that push this agenda, they don't live like that. Does Gavin Newsom live in an apartment near transit? No, he lives in a single family home. And that's the dream that people want. And so, and people say, well, that's terrible. You're going to concrete over our beautiful, amazing natural environment. Of course not. We love our outdoors and our environment. And that's one of the magical, wonderful things about California. But here's the fact. California already has one of the it's in terms of housing density, we're one of the most dense in the country. Barely 5% or so of our land is developed. We did the calculation for our policy report on housing. You could increase that. You could add another 10 million homes.
1%.
By 1%, exactly,
Correct,
from
yes.
5 to 6. And we'd still be among the densest in America. So I think the policy shows, sometimes I put it like this: housing choice. If you want to live in an apartment, let's make that possible. Great. And let's make it affordable. If you want to live in a single family home, we should provide you with that option as well. And let buildings be built, homes be built everywhere where people want them. I think that's the way through this.
Well, amen to that. I'd also add that I think that the power of local activists in cities and towns of all sizes across the state to actually demand that housing be built,
Yes.
pressure their local governments, their city councils to show up at meetings and speak out for, YIMBY
Yes.
kind of activity is also essential. So top down, bottom up is probably the magic formula, because as much as the state can do, if a city doesn't want to move in the direction of housing,
Yes.
it's not going to happen, or at least it'll be litigated.
No, that's right. But there are cities that do want to, but they're being blocked, and the state can help unblock that.
Yes. So it's a combination. I want to take a quick time out and encourage all of our listeners and viewers to subscribe and follow us so you don't miss another great conversation like this with gubernatorial candidate Steve Hilton. I didn't actually formally welcome you at the top of the show. Steve, we're in Silicon Valley, and as we move to close this conversation, I want to ask you to pitch me on a couple things.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to throw you not fastballs, maybe a slight curve. The first is that you're trying out for one of the biggest jobs in the country, albeit one of the biggest jobs in the world, right? Governor of California. What's your elevator pitch for why you are best qualified for this job?
So I think that the combination of experience I've had in my career is actually exactly what you want in this role. So people know me from my recent role here in America on TV. I hosted a show on Fox News and podcasts and so on, and I've been a commentator in the media, and that's all true. And I think, by the way, that is helpful because communication is an important part of leadership these days. But that's really been not the main focus of my career. The main focus and most of my time in my career has been in business. I've worked in business around the world. I've worked for some of the biggest companies in the world. I've started my own businesses, working for other companies in a consulting firm, starting a restaurant, a tech firm here. I've got a lot of experience in business. And I think that brings with it a kind of business mindset that you need one of the things I think is that's so striking about the people in charge in California after 15 or so years of one-party rule, it throws up these machine politicians whose real skill, you could say maybe their only skill, is navigating the party machine, playing politics. People like Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris, they don't know that. I don't think they even understand the concept of getting things done, of actually making things happen, of chasing progress, of understanding that it's not enough just to say it or to sign the bill or the executive order, just as you mentioned earlier. You've got to actually get in there and do it. I mean, my first job was the project manager for a construction company in London. I mean, I was literally going out to construction sites as the project manager, chasing up. We were building an office building actually in London. Like, what's going on? Have you done this? Have you done that? Kind of training, that kind of business mindset, I think, is essential. But then, of course, on top of that, I have experience in government, actually in a government pretty much the same, roughly the same kind of size as the government of California in the UK. I was senior advisor to the Prime Minister, responsible for the implementation of our policy program. And so I not only helped develop it, but once we're in the government, was part of the team that's trying to make it happen in the government. And I've got the battles and the scars in the encounters I had with the bureaucracy, with civil servants, with all the forces that are trying to stop you from getting things done. I've been through that and I've seen it. So I think it's that combination, which I would say is pretty unique. I don't think there's been a candidate for governor with a better set of experiences that prepares them for the job that being governor is than me, frankly. Business experience, government experience, media platform. I think that is a combination that not only is right to help me win the election, which is the first step, but the most important thing is to actually make change happen when we get there.
Or maybe a better American accent.
Well, I don't know about that. I think, you can say, my favorite point on the accent is that, so Arnold Schwarzenegger's a friend. We got to know Arnold when he was governor and David Cameron was leader of the opposition, and we came here and spent time with him learning about what's going on here. And now we joke about the fact that, of course, I have the British accent, despite being an American since 2021, in case anyone was worried about that. But my parents are Hungarian, and my entire family's from Hungary. And Arnold, of course, was Austrian. And so
There's some history.
exactly. So you have the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So, you've had the Austrian, now it's time for the Hungarian.
Yeah, well, my family on my father's side fled Ukraine in the 20s.
Right.
And fled pogroms, fled persecution, thank God came through Ellis Island. And otherwise, my brother and I joke we'd be conscripts in the Russian army.
Yeah.
So thank you. Steve, I want to finish with 5 rapid fire questions that I ask every interviewee. First is, you're king for a day.
Yes.
Single biggest thing you do to fix California?
Well, my mind has gone to the the bureaucracy, because I do think that you can't, you're not the king, actually, and I do respect the Constitution, but as the governor, you do run the executive branch. So I think my answer to that would be to have all the appointments I would want to make to all the agencies, all there on day one.
Yes, the deep state of California.
Yeah.
Push to reform it. Which California leader, past or present, do you most admire?
Well, it's interesting. I do admire Pat Brown, because I think that, I mean, I read a great book called The Browns of California, which taught me a lot about Pat Brown, of course, Jerry Brown, his son, and the sister as well, Kathleen, I think, and she was in politics for a little bit as well. And I think that it's very interesting about their family history, but I learned so much about California history. Pat Brown, I think, in many ways captured the kind of ambition and swagger of California that I really aspire for us to have. The amazing things we did then, really the golden age of California in many ways, building, the state water project and the UC system and the freeway, just that sense of absolute ambition and possibility. So I do think Pat Brown is a pretty good candidate.
I think that's a good poll. Yeah.
I've got to say that I did like actually learning about the first incarnation of Jerry Brown. I was surprised to read about him in a way that made me feel much more sympathetic to him the first time around. He, had some interesting ideas. He wanted to be the outsider. He liked the idea of, he's very into decentralizing power, giving communities power. There's lots of things about Jerry Brown V1 that I liked.
He was in his moonbeam phase.
Yeah, maybe that's the Jerry Brown I liked.
Yeah. What outsiders get wrong about California, in your view?
that it's just the coast. That's all they think of. And I just spend so much time in the obviously there. A lot of people live in the coast, but you just go to the Central Valley, the magnificence of our amazing agriculture industry. No one really knows about that. The fact that we're world beating in so many areas, and just the diversity. I know that word is overused, but the diversity of what we have here. You know, the forests and the potential we have there for our timber industry, and then going out to San Diego again, doesn't get as much attention as tech here, but bios, life sciences. There's so many amazing things. But I definitely think that sort of, when people think of California, they think of the coastal parts of our state, which are magnificent, but so is the rest of it.
So true. Yeah, drive on the 101 from here to Santa Barbara. You'll get a taste of the real California out there. It looks a lot more like Texas in some places than people would imagine. What gives you hope, most hope about California right now?
I just the energy for change that I see. I mean, people are really up for it. I really feel. I mean, I was just in the Huntington Beach July the 4th parade. Amazing. I mean, I think like 200,000 people. I've never, seen anything like that. It was incredible to be part of it. But I was honestly, you could say Huntington Beach, fine. It's very, like you'd expect support there, but not on the scale that I saw there. But it was really, really overwhelming. Just that sense of a desire for change and belief that it's possible.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Last question, fill in the blank. California is?
I want to have two.
Okay.
Because I want to say golden. Yeah, but it is golden because there's nowhere better than California. I firmly believe that. With all our problems, there's literally nowhere better on earth. I mean, I always say this: if we think that if we think that America is the greatest nation on earth, which is what I believe, and then California is the best of America. And there's this phrase I use in a lot. It's in my book, in my speeches, which is California means to America what America means to the world. And so that's what I mean by making California golden again. And so I wanted two words. I want to say golden again, because we can be a lot better than what we are today. And then it really will be the best place anywhere anyone's ever seen.
So move back now, right? I mean, I was going to ask you.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
Yes, it'll just get more expensive.
I was going to say, you're probably at a baseline here, other than interest rates. Steve, thank you so much.
Great to see you. Thank you
Great
very
to
much.
spend time with you.
Appreciate it. Thanks.